questions and engagement between the audience and then our guests. 3 guests, Professor Mutambara, Professor Mavunga online, and then Professor Munyai. So we're going to open up. We'll take some questions here. We do not have time. I must insist on this. I know it's not easy for many of you to speak for a very long time, but I hope not to be brutal enough. I'm going to ask you to be short. If you have a question, ask it straight away. Don't explain anything, if you could, right? If you have a comment, go straight away and then ask it. And then we'll ask our guests to answer them. And then, of course, we're hoping, if not, I'm hoping that our guests will also go among themselves to answer some questions. I think, Professor Mutambara, you've heard from the discussant. You may have some sort of rebuttals a little bit later. But let's take the audience first. We also have an audience online. Did you receive any? Do you have any questions coming out of the audience? Not really? You have one? Okay, so let's take the people inside and then we'll get them. Okay, sir, can you introduce yourself? Please introduce yourself by saying your name, your institution or company, where you're from, and your question. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Malusi Mncube, postdoctoral research fellow here, University of Johannesburg. I'd like to thank the 3 esteemed professors. Thank you very much. And one of the things that has pleased me, they've got a bent of Pan-Africanism. I'm happy about that. And they are warning us as Africans. I really appreciate that. But having said that, can Professor Mutambara at least tell us the downside? Because he told us what is scary about AI. And that is very important because I could be his intelligence reporter reporting to him as the president to look out for this and that. But we also need to know the downside because AI is not omnipotent. Yeah. AI can never know everything. There will always be unknowns. So tell us the downsides. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks very much. Anybody else? I think the gentleman on this side.
Greetings respectively to the sitting. My name is Tato Sekwele.
Can you speak a little bit louder, Tato?
Okay, I'm saying greetings to the sitting. My name is Tato Sekwele, affiliated to University of Johannesburg, Faculty of Engineering. Mine is more of engagement. So with regards to globalization and the geopolitics, what Professor Mutambara and Prof. Munyai spoke about, mine is one on that, the geopolitics and what are the relationships. So we have to start by looking at 1D, deglobalization to reglobalize. So that will speak about looking internally at in-house built solutions that will be proliferated. So to proliferate one system, I will mention this nuclear non-proliferation bill that was passed the beginning of our democracy. So we should proliferate that bill so that we're able to have in-house solutions that speaks to revolutionizing our data, revolutionizing our software, GPUs, hardwares, and the technologies to advance science, technology, and innovation within our own length and breadth of this nation, not only this nation, but this continent. And the second part is also on military mechanics. So on military mechanics, we also have to break away from the monolithic arrangement, which most of the global north is a unilateral arrangement, not a bilateral or not a multilateral strategic relationship, but we have to look at what the mechanisms exist within our capabilities and abilities that were there before we gained our democratic dispensation. So we have to look at what mechanisms were there and how are we delivering them. So the answer is that we have been building transformational solutions through our multidisciplinary approach, but because of ownership of economic and also tariffs that are there within geopolitics, we need to be deliberate, intentional, and decisive about our minerals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I look on this side if there's anybody on this side? We're going to take 3. Can you be short enough, very quick, then we'll see if we can get a 4th one, and then we'll open up for the for our guests.
Thank you. My question is the professor.
Can you tell us your name and where you're from?
My name is Wesley Morris. I'm from the Northwest University.
Thank you.
So the professor has mentioned the need for us for technological for us to develop our own technologies, both hardware and software. But it seems there is a gap. So what I want to find out from them is what is standing between us and producing our own technologies. They've mentioned that we've got all the resources, we've got the people, we've got universities. Why are we not doing that?
Okay, thank you. The next one was very short.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Obakim Matlwana. I'm doing masters in AI. And my question is with Africa holistically. Which companies in Africa can we say right now can create a large language model? That's my question. And who's going to fund that company? And how can we employ people to create these AIs? And those are my questions.
Thank you, Baking. I thought maybe you're the master in AI. You might be able to help us do that, right? All right, let's open up to to our speakers and guests. So let's start with Professor Mutambara. Excuse me?
Okay.
Yeah, let's start with Mutambara, and then we'll extend it to you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll try to be very brief. I'll also say a few things. Today is not a book launch. We're going to launch the book on the 7th of May. And in that book, I try to address the issues. The title of the book is Artificial Intelligence, a Driver of Inclusive Development and Shared Prosperity for the Global South. I try to answer many things there. But today we're just talking about AI and geopolitics. But on the 7th of May, we'll do the book launch and go through this one. A very good point from Professor Mavunga. What value system or systems do we want in our AI systems as Africans? Also, let us use our own languages. The Chinese, the Japanese are writing AI systems in their own languages. So we want African languages in these AI systems. So that in addition to using AI systems from Silicon Valley, from China, from wherever, we also build AI systems and be very clear about the value system or the values we want. I've just given you the values the Chinese don't want you to talk about time and square because it's a bad part of their history. So don't talk about it. The Americans are saying we must make sure that in these AI systems, we have American values, Western values. So when you use the product from Silicon Valley, know that that product deliberately was designed to pursue and advance American systems. So we must be very clear about what we want. NVIDIA and cassava. So in Kigali, Strive Masiwa announced what they're doing together with NVIDIA. They're going to be producing GPUs and so on and so forth. That's attempting to address number 3. Remember I said our agenda as Africans is number 1, use AI. Number 2, build AI systems. Number 3, build the hardware. So Strive Masiwa and Cassava are playing in that space. They're trying. We'll see how far they go. But we need more than that. Because think about it this way. One company called NVIDIA has a market cap of $3.34 trillion. Our collective GDP as Africans is 3.1. So one little company is bigger than all of us Africans. If we're going to benefit from the economics of AI, we must do all 3. In particular, the 3rd one, which is about the compute power, which drives and powers AI. Very important point raised by Professor Munyai. Let us not be silo-minded. South Africa, Nigeria. Why don't you work together as the African Union? 1.4 billion people, collective GDP, 3.1 trillion. Those are the numbers that will drive AI. AI requires lots of money. AI requires a large market. So for us to prosper under the AI revolution, we must work as the African continent. Beyond Africa, we must work as what is called global Africa, Africa and its diaspora. The numbers are as follows. Africa, 1.4 billion people. Global Africa, 2.2 billion people. The global South, 6.6 billion people. Numbers are very critical. Let us cooperate and work together. Yes, very correct. The Europeans and the Americans are in disagreement. The major debate is innovation versus regulations. The Americans have said, don't regulate too much, allow innovations. The Americans are very cautious. The Europeans are very cautious and they want more regulation. So there's a little debate around regulation versus innovation. And we need to see how we can play in that space as well. There's a very close link between critical minerals, rare earths, and AI systems, because the hardware, the NPUs, GPUs, and CPUs require critical minerals from South Africa, from the DRC, which are being auctioned for a song. So why don't we as Africans leverage the natural resource base, our critical minerals, our rare earths, and be able to use that as a basis of partnership, as a basis to participate and be able to play a role. What's happening in the DRC is a travesty of justice. We can't trade off $20 trillion for $50 million. We must know the value of our assets. And it's a short-term move that the DRC is doing. But if we're working as SADC or as the continent, we'll be able to avoid that situation. Just on the audience, downside, we see in the future that the future does not belong to robots on their own. It belongs to the human being plus the robot, what we call human augmentation or human 2.0. So the doctor and the machine will produce a better doctor. The engineer plus the machine, a better engineer. So human augmentation, human 2.0 is what we profile, and we're not necessarily pushing for the replacement of the human being. But we are simply saying that you must know that there is super intelligence coming, and we must close on the LLMs. LLMs, the last one. LLMs, these guys have 200 PhDs in the same company. So you need lots of human capital. You need lots of energy. There are companies now that are setting up private nuclear plants, power plants, because the energy required to run an LLM is so huge. So individual companies are coming up with nuclear power plants to power AI. So you need human capital, you need energy, you need serious money, $100 million, $200 million. So we need to make sure we mobilize the education, the energy, and also the cash. That can be done through numbers.
Thank you.
We do that through numbers.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Professor Munyai to very quickly come on board and then provide some insight? And then after him, I'll ask Professor Mavunga to also add a few things. And then we'll take one question from the online, and then we'll have to close it.
No, it's okay. No, we can take more from the.
Can take more. Okay, great.
We take all the people online. We take all of them.
Well, thank you. Good question that came up. I'll try to sum some of them. I think when it comes to issue of globalization and deglobalization, I think one thing that we need to remember is that most countries, developed countries, at the moment, they are deglobalizing in areas where they have disadvantage, where they're not competing well. They close on those areas. However, they are pushing globalization in areas where they have comparative advantage. And one key area is on this new technology issue, that digitally, they tend to advance globalization massively. Your Facebook, all these companies that are coming, Amazon and the like, e-commerce and all, it's globalization. At a time when Trump is talking about deglobalization at home. So I think we need to understand exactly what is happening and what should be our position in dealing with that. The other element to answer my brother right here, who's studying AI at UJ, is that
Perhaps we need to learn from India, Russia, and Western countries. But I can only speak on what I witnessed in China, is that in China, universities are now no longer dealing with the workplace of the past, where you study and finish your degree in AI and you search for a job with a CV and get a job. That's the old way. The universities in China and working with government are putting these students who are doing very well, come up with products, workable products, and assist these students to form their own companies, so that by the time they finish their degrees, they have their companies that are going to run, and the university will have shares in those companies, but assist them how to run business, how to do. So the question of entrepreneur is not something that you go and learn outside the university. You move from university as not seeking for a job, but as an employer. You have a job straight from the university. I think we have to think innovatively to try to address some of the challenges that we have around these issues. We have the minerals, we have land, we have the brains. I think what is needed is thinking visionary leadership and bringing in scholars, business people, and government officials, and sustain some of these policies we have. These things of 3-4 years, governments that come like bubble gums, they stay in 2 years and they're out and cut off all these policies, start afresh. I think it has to come to an end. We have to be consistent and drive some of these agendas, not as just South Africa, but at a SADC level. Ensure that we bring everyone on board and find innovative way at a continental level so that we work together and close ranks in these important issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Munyai. Professor, do you have anything to add, or at least respond to some of the questions?
Yes, I do.
Excellent.
As a general statement, I echo what Prof. Mutambara said about the DRC deal. It was a very bad deal. But it's also a symptom of deals that our governments enter without actual verifiable and verified knowledge, using resources that can geomap them. You have across the table investors, so-called, that are coming in knowing exactly what is underneath our soil. And here we are on the other side of the table, not knowing exactly what is under our own soil, which we step on every day. So that's a gap we need to address. It's something we can address. Secondly, what do we import and how do we choose to import things? I have often said, and I will say it again, between getting a tractor and getting equipment to make a tractor, I choose to get equipment to make a tractor if I cannot make it, because that opens up possibilities for reverse engineering and other forms of re-innovation as opposed to renovation. I think that that also cuts out a lot of redundancies in terms of a foreign currency outflow. For all the talk about the diaspora, I do not think our governments have done enough. There are a few pockets that are beginning to happen. People may say what they want about Rwanda, but that's a classic case of how Africans are being mobilized beyond what political persuasion you may belong. United in the idea that when you come there, there is a space where you can actually innovate. We might want to understand that until we get towards an ideology that unites us, there's a job to be done. Sometimes if you're an innovator, it is easy for you to create conditions that make it very difficult for you to access the very same people that you care about. Governments care about people, whether they want votes or they genuinely care. Those that mean good, particularly in as creatives, we want to get the people to the people because we care and because we want to work with them to find solutions to Africa. And so if you draw a Venn diagram between us and our political systems, we may have different aims, but we are united by the same kind of constituents. And how we get there is something we have to navigate. I have lived long enough to know that as intellectuals who mean good, whole entire generations were rendered themselves useless from becoming impactful because they chose to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. One last point that I will say is Cassava AI is a deal, is something that I think will be the game changer. Why? It's not necessarily delinking globalization from globalization. What Strive Masiwa did was to form a company. Remember, I was an engineer, comes back from Europe, starts against very difficult odds, starts Econet Wireless. And then from a very local company, which achieves buy-in globally, he starts to develop a portfolio that becomes very successful. And then when it becomes successful, he recognizes the major problems within the telecom sector, one of which was how do you achieve compute capacity for Africa? And what is required? What is not so much lowest hanging fruit, but in physics, we talk in terms of the path of least resistance to achieving gradual indigenization of telecoms tech, and by which I mean hardware that can anchor and enable a software. And what you are now seeing is what is happening, which he announced in Kigali. So there is a sense in which if these efforts have to be galvanized, I think we now need to see a confluence of different skill sets and capabilities. Aliko Dangote is also doing the same thing, by the way. He's industrializing Africa. So there are a lot of positives here. And the industries we are going to be building are not analog. They are not only digital, but they have to be AI enabled. And I think that's a space where I can say I'm pretty happy. I know that Professor Ntambara will talk about that in the launch of his book, but it's worth bearing in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mubanga. Take some questions from online participants. Tandika? Take your microphone. You have a speaker, okay? Speaker online, can you tell us your name, your institution, and then be brief?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sibahle. I'm from IT Web. I'd like to pose my question to any of the speakers. I'd like to know where does Africa rank in the AI race, particularly because we are known to be more consumers than producers of emerging technologies. So essentially, what should Africa do to keep up with the global forerunners? Thank you.
Thanks. Is there a second one, probably? Or you have the question, you can read it there. It should be on.
It's on now. Yeah. So we have a couple of questions. The first is from Dr. Sereko, who is asking any of the speakers, what are the dangers of AI in South Africa, specifically in the context of the current time unemployment rate? Second, we have a question from Professor Spamandla Zondi, who is asking, how do the infrastructure disparities affect participation in the digital revolution? Third is from Francis Lamola, who is asking, in the changing nature of corporate service work, which HR roles will evolve, which will become redundant? How will organizations measure HR's value in an AI-powered world? What skills will HR professionals need to stay relevant? And with the fear of job displacement, as AI-driven automation increases, do we have any clarity on which employees will be affected by this? We have another question also open to any of the speakers from Dr. Evans Sogomba, who's asking, what does the launch of AI factories in Africa by Cassava AI mean for African democracy? And how will this influence the global politics? Another question also open to any of the speakers is from Professor Gabriel Kadanga from the UKZN, who's asking what strategies should African countries have to manage, firstly, data colonization and digital resource inequality, and then also in the realm of military applications and autonomous weapons. Lastly, Dr. Crispin is asking, is it possible for Africa to develop AI systems with the borrowed knowledge from the North? And then we have a final one directed to Professor Mtambara. And this is from Ben Hoven. Sorry, just a moment. I think that was a good one. He was asking, Prof. Mtambara, do you believe AI supremacy could replace nuclear deterrence as a central element of geopolitical influence?
Excellent. Thank you very much. These are a lot of many questions, but we'll start with Professor Mutambara. If you could hit, you don't have to answer all of them, but if you can pick a few, and then of course we have to say, we apologize that we may not answer, our guests may not answer all the questions, or we'll just ask them to answer the ones they probably remember and where they think they can add some really very solid insight. Professor Mutambara.
Thank you very much. Those are very detailed questions. I must start by saying most of those questions are answered in my book, so I won't say too much today. We'll talk about them on the 7th of May. Just a few things. Africans, what do we need to do? We need to have urgency. When I say load shedding, when I say poverty, energy poverty, those are our problems. You can't expect Silicon Valley to come up with a solution for load shedding for us. In other words, let us use AI to solve our problems. Let us understand our problems. Let's work on the human capital, on the cash and the hardware that's required to drive AI. On jobs, here is the equation. There are three kinds of things. 1, job destruction. 2, job modification. 3, new jobs. All we need to do in South Africa, in Africa and the global south is to make sure that the new jobs plus the modified jobs are much more than the destroyed jobs. If you do that, then AI will bring more jobs. If you allow the destroyed jobs to be more than the new jobs and the modified jobs, then AI will create unemployment. So get that equation right. Infrastructure is key. Without infrastructure, without data, there is no AI. In terms of education, we're moving away from the certificate. Don't show me your certificate. Show me what you can do. What are your digital skills? What are your competencies? What are your capabilities? In other ways, the way we teach, the way we learn has to change so that we have skills, competencies, and capabilities that are required in the AI revolution. Last one, AI versus nuclear. Very interesting. You know, AI might even give us a bigger threat than nuclear. As I explained earlier on, the barriers to entry for AI are much lower than nuclear. Even if you want to create a nuclear bomb today, it's not going to be easy because you need to be a nuclear physicist. You need uranium, you need energy, you need money. AI systems is just your brain and compute power. So if we are not careful, when we get into superintelligence, the dangers of AI will be much more than the dangers of nuclear. But more importantly, you can combine both, nuclear plus AI. That's a major threat. That's why I talked about autonomous nuclear weapon systems. That is the danger. But I'll stop there.
Thank you, Professor Mutambara. Professor Munyai? And then we'll take you, Professor Mabenga, after Munyai.
On nuclear, the then Soviet Union had what we call, before we talk about AI and all this, as far back as 80s, if not 70s, the dead hand, that in an event that the entire leadership is wiped out in a nuclear war, the nuclear system of the Soviet Union will be able to launch attacks independent of leadership to all over the world in such an event. So, I mean, these things are not new. I think we need to understand that there is indeed, just to understand just that system, which was, we're talking of the 80s. What more now? What kind of system do we have in relation to nuclear? But nuclear, not just the warfare nuclear. We saw what happened in Japan and so many other places. And the systems that we use as we in cities and our system, data, all what we're talking about, there is also fear that if not managed, if there are no rules, if there's no regulation, this can be used to harm instead of developing societies. I think when it comes to Professor Zondi's question, indeed, the disparity in terms of rural urban, it will remain a huge issue unless governments invest more in rural areas and find best way of ensuring that a rural area does receive required resources using technology. One program, an additional program that I found out in China, is that when it comes to high school students, people, they using AI. They are using those in high school to help primary students in poor areas using AI. So instead of parents, they only have time just to answer homework questions, student to student teaching. I mean, there's so much that can be done to ensure that through digital, we can bring in those in poor areas in. But there should be a clear way of thinking at the highest level. Also, innovative way of thinking. But at the end of the day, I think our topic is the impact of all this in geopolitics. A lot of thinking is required, more resources, plus more thinking in terms of assisting at the policy level our own governments, at a regional level and a continental level, so that we go beyond talking. We start doing in terms of putting all these resources and speak as one African continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Monyai. My question is, are African government listening and doing? This is these are two rhetorical questions. But anyway, Professor Mabunga, could you, okay, go ahead, please.
I would like to throw that question to you at the risk of sounding controversial. What have we, the academics, done? Number one. Number two, what value proposition have we offered, A, the government, B, those industrialists that might listen to us, with anything that's worth listening to? So I'm throwing that right back at us. So number one. Number two, the biggest geopolitical threat to Africa is its youth. The youth are potentially the biggest geopolitical blessing and resource. Mind you, today, anyone who is using a cell phone is more or less using some form of AI anyway. So that's already happening. The most tech-savvy people are usually young people or people who have challenges and are solving them in everyday life. I'm a Zimbabwean. Usually when I'm home, I'm either in the street or in the village. I see this happening every time. When I'm in rural Kenya, I see this every time. Are there challenges? Yes. The number of computers and the number of schools that have computers is still very low. Even in Kenya, where we are told about Silicon Savannah, when you go out of Nairobi, in places like Nyeri, you will find the regional high school, the best school there, only have 50 computers or 100 out of a 2,500 child population of kids. That these are the realities, that sometimes the talk does not match the reality on the ground. And yet here we are expecting that young people who are being prepared to embrace AI and so forth. Well, it's also true that a good number of young people are now also using cell phones. Could we shift the platform so that the main computing can be done on a cell phone instead of a laptop? I don't know. And how do we ensure that becomes the primary knowledge access and innovation platform? That's another question. What I know is this: problems are our money. We should not be running away from them. We should be going towards them before we call people to come and solve them for us. Let's remember, we are losing money by doing so. Now, who are our partners? It depends on which governments. There are some governments that are receptive to bold ideas. We need to gang up. Those of us who are willing, gang up and do what needs to be done. Each and every one of us is doing something on their part, at least the committed intellectual who has committed suicide to mere academia. The question is, can these efforts be galvanized so that there is a critical mass, a critical force towards what we aspire to achieve? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take one or two more questions and then we will close. Any questions, comments, or insults? No, I'm just kidding. Anybody? Good. So if there are no questions, no comments, I want to say thanks. Oh, there is somebody on the other side there, yeah.
I'm Hakima Haider from the Jesuit Refugee Service, Southern Africa. I don't know if it's a question or maybe like a thought thrown in, because I think when Professor Munyai talked about Rwanda and saying that we're talking about AI in Rwanda, what are they likely to do with it? But when you think about China, China is also very authoritarian, but you see Rwanda in terms of the focus and the development, like if we think of the plus side, not the human rights side, in terms of the development of the country and how that has transformed. And in the deal with the DRC, where they look outside of the continent and the amount of money that they're giving to the US, isn't that a form of us thinking through A, negotiation with Rwanda, B, negotiation with, because that also proves AI capabilities, because with money, then we can improve our capabilities militarily. So it's just a thought thrown out there that was running in my head.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let me have you on the other side there. Looks like we're closing. We opened with you and we're closing with you.
No, it's fine. Okay. One must take advantage when you have esteemed professors like this, because what they're talking is about Pan-Africanism. They're carrying on the culture of Kwame Nkrumah. So for me to have started to speak and to end speak, it's very important for me. But having said that, the professor from MIT has thrown the gauntlet to the house. So in order to walk our talk, I would like respectfully to challenge Professor Mtambara, Professor Mnyai, and you, Professor and Professor of the MIT, from today, without any excuse, respectfully, to have a steering committee to start coming out of the framework of these ideas to create the critical mass, because these are the brains. These are the brains here. We don't have to go outside. Can we have a steering committee? And probably could they be reporting to you? And can we promulgate this thing and can it be spread over? I think history can even start right here. to these professors. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this challenge. Please give me a good hand of applause. Professors, are you ready for this challenge? Yes, Professor Mavunga, can you hear me?
Certainly, let me just add this, that the advantage of some of us being abroad, but always coming home, is that we get to be in many places at once. I call it the African omnipresence. I just feel sometimes that we have not harnessed that power. That's one of the reasons why I've been trying to stay close to Professor Mtambara, because I know University of Johannesburg, I've been following it for quite a while, since when Professor Chilizi Marwala was at the helm. And the amount of things that have happened in the AI space and in languages is immense. I think it should be built on. There is also a node already ready to take place to be harnessed to this. Dedan Kimathi University of Technology in Kenya, their DSAIL program is there and ready to roll. We are focusing there on how do you apply this knowledge to the ground level, to solve problems, to conscientize our young people on what AI means by, among other things, starting small drone training programs for them. And then we crowdsource how they are going to use them. You will be surprised by how much young people can be, when caught early at that stage, can actually do wonderful things. Last place I think of is the responsible AI lab in Ghana, led by JJ. So the infrastructure is already there. I usually don't like talking endlessly. I like to act, and you do not have to worry about taking up this gauntlet from here. Let's do it.
Thank you very, very much. Please give them a good hand of applause. And before we end and we close, before we go to the breakaway for the Madibeng lunch for a light meal, is that right? And then I ask Professor Mutambara to do a thanks, closing thanks. I'd like to quickly pick up a few things. I'm not summarizing, but these are the things I have in mind as remarks. I think it is very clear to all of us before we even came here, and then reinforced by the conversation, the presentation of our guests, is that there's a profound artificial intelligence revolution underway. The question is, would Africa take advantage of that as well? That we know the answer. It's in the wind. But most important, clearly it is say that in the end, the story must go back to the beginning. And our beginning was the theme of this seminar, the impact of AI on geopolitics. 2 or 3 things I want to leave with you as takeaways. The first one, I think, from Professor Mutambara himself, is that artificial intelligence affects geopolitics largely and profoundly, and then also vice versa. Yeah. The second one is that, of course, it is really redefining how global powers are shaping themselves, and of course, being hard power, soft power, but also the abuse and usage of it's going to be very critical for tomorrow. And then the last one is the role of African sovereignty into this whole profound revolution. Africa is going to have to define itself. Many of you here will do it. And I think there's a personal responsibility on how we do that, but it's also organizational, but also national and continental ways to have an architecture to make that happen. On this note, I want to say thanks to all of you online and in person here, and please give yourself a good hand of applause. Professor Mutambara, please.
Thank you very much, Kofi, for chairing this session. And I want to thank you all for coming. And as we go, let us remember all these ideas will rise or fall on leadership. Leadership in the academy, leadership in civic society, leadership in government. Secondly, agency. We must take responsibility for our lives. Agency says, be the change you seek to see in the world. Be the change you seek to see in the AI revolution. I thank you so very much. Thank you online, thank you in person. And those who are here, you can go for a light meal. I thank you so very much.